This is a video tutorial on the exclusive right to sell listing contract. This is a contract between the company and a seller, in which case this is Elite Pacific Properties. So the contract would be between Elite Pacific Properties and seller. The first section here talks about licensee and brokerage firm is kind of similar to the purchase contract, where we want to make sure that we disclose that we are members of the National Association of Realtors. So we'll always check off the first box, which is a realtor and member of the National Association of Realtors. The next box down is obviously the address, where you would put in the complete address of the property. Then you would put in the TMK number, and then you would enter the name of the brokerage firm, which is Elite Pacific Properties, the address, and then here's where you would enter your name as the listing agent broker representing the seller. And you would just simply put in your name and then your telephone number. On the right hand side is the seller's information. So by now you've probably pulled a title report, or you have looked up the tax records and you now know the correct seller information. You would simply put that here. So seller number 1, seller number 2. Down further we have number 1, agency. Just like the purchase contract, we have to explain to the seller who represents who, and in case of a dual agency situation, and then whether or not seller agrees to dual agency. Sometimes a seller may not even understand what that means, and this is where you would have the conversation about what is dual agency. Sometimes a seller might feel like they don't want to do dual agency, and you might need to kind of educate them a little bit about what that is, because we have had times where they have said we don't want dual agency, and that would kind of not be in the best interest of the seller, since we have so many agents within our own company that we have a vast pool of buyers that we potentially would not be able to bring to the property. So sometimes there's a misunderstanding of what dual agency is, and this would be the time that you would have that discussion. But most always a seller will agree, and you would check the box agree. Going a little further here, ownership, title, and authority. This just is a disclaimer that the seller says that he is the certified owner of the property and has the right to sell the property. And if there are any exclusions or exceptions to that, then you would want to put that in this box down here. Usually that wouldn't be the case, so it would just be left blank, or you could put NA or just put dashes in there. But of course, if you had something you wanted to specify, you would obviously put it in this line. Number 3 is sort of a definition of what exclusive right to sell is, and that's just simply something for the seller to review. Number 4, listing period. This is the period of time that you're going to have the listing. A lot of times sellers don't want to do a whole year. You kind of want to try to get an agreement for a year, and then maybe somewhere down here where you can maybe give them the option to cancel within a certain period of time. But having a year contract, it will help you so that you don't have to ask for change forms or redo listing agreements, that sort of thing. So typically people will put a year. If you don't feel comfortable with that, 6 months is okay too, but this is, again, is the period of time that you have a signed listing contract on file. Now this next box down here where it says either party may end the listing with 30 days, calendar days, advance written notice to the other, is the period of time that you would have to, you need to give 30 days notice basically. But then the next box down here says that neither party may end the listing before, and then whatever date you have here. This is the time period that absolutely no way can either party cancel unless both parties agree. So this is the time period that you would think to yourself, how long do I really need to sell this house, and what do I need to do to get it on the market? Because a lot of times sellers don't understand that that it takes probably about a month to get a property ready to be put on the market, like cleaning, staging, getting marketing together, all of the stuff that goes into prepping a home for sale. Then finally it gets listed. There are certain things that need to be done with regard to advertising, that by the time you've done all this stuff, that's when you start getting buyers interested in coming into the property. So somewhere between 2 weeks to a month it takes to actually prep a house. So you may have a listing that you take right off the bat, there might be like a lag time between the time that you actually get the listing and the time that you actually start marketing it and putting it into the MLS and starting to do open houses and that sort of thing. So you want to give yourself a really good time frame so that this seller can't cancel on you in the middle of you doing all this stuff. And you need to have a good period of time to do this due diligence of getting it properly listed, getting the advertising going. It takes a little while. So when you're doing your listing presentation, you need to explain a little bit about the timing involved with getting a listing on the market. So I'd say probably about 2 weeks to a month to get the listing going, and then at least a good month or two to actually bring in buyers to stimulate offers. So 3 months I would say is a good period of time to have nobody be allowed to cancel the contract. So I have here, you'll see I have April 6th here, which is today when I'm doing this, and then I have September, and you're probably wondering why it's a little bit further. I like to think about the time of the year too, where things are a little bit busier than others, and I'm thinking about the summer, that the summer market is really hot. So while right now we're sort of in the spring, I don't want my client to cancel on me in the middle of the summer. So if we were to do the 3 months, you'd see April, May, June, July, we'd be in the middle of the summer. And then if my client wasn't happy with the results, he would be able to cancel on me within the 3 months. So what I did here was I made it a little bit longer and pushed it all the way out till the end of September. That way I have the entire summer market to show it and really bring in offers before anyone is allowed to cancel this contract. The longer you make this, though, you might get a little bit of pushback by the seller, but at least you can explain that why if you were doing something like this with regard to a period of time during the year that's busier than another, you have a little bit of leeway with that by explaining. Now that I've explained that a little bit further, let's go back to where we say either party may end the listing with 30 days advanced written notice. Once this deadline passes, then your client could cancel the contract before the end of the year with this 30 days notice. So this date is very important that you pay attention to this, because whatever you put here, that is your absolute guaranteed time frame to sell the property. After that, if the client gives you 30 days written notice, you have to bow out of the listing. What happens when they do that? It does happen, and you just have a conversation with your client, as to maybe why are they wanting to cancel the listing agreement with you, and then possibly if you were able to explain, maybe there were some things that you can explain that possibly he might want to give you an extension, or maybe give you just 30 more days, something like that. But again, this is very important, because this way no one is allowed to cancel before this date. So keep that in mind. So now talking about the protection period, what is a protection period? So this is the period of time after your listing has either been, let's say the seller cancels the contract and now you have to withdraw it from the MLS, or it is expired all on its own, like this deadline has run its course and now it's expired, or you want to, or the seller just decides to go ahead and give you that 30 days notice and cancel. Once it has canceled by way of either a withdrawal or expired or any other reason, then this protection period starts ticking from that day that you've taken out of the MLS. The 180 days is a period of time that you as an agent are protected with whatever list you provide. So you have to provide your seller with a list of people that you showed the property to. So all of those agents that are coming into your showings and open houses, you want to keep a list of all the clients that they brought through. That's why it's so important to ask them what's your client's name when they come in to do showings or open houses. That way you have a running list of all of the people that ever saw the property. That way, during that 180 days, if any one of those potential buyers came back to the table and said, I want to now put in an offer on this property, but you're no longer the listing agent, you would still get your commission because of this 180-day protection period. Then, of course, at the end of the 180 days, that will expire, and then you would not be able to collect anything after that deadline has passed. Some people make it a little longer, some people make it shorter. Sellers I've seen have chopped this down to 90 days instead of 180. It really all depends on what this is a typical time frame, 180 days, but it just really depends on what you and your seller decide to do. But if you're writing out the contract, I would go ahead and put 180 days there, and then if the seller, balks about it, then you can always change it. But that is the period of time. It's very important that you keep a list of all of the people that have come into the property, so that when this listing does expire or it is withdrawn, that you provide that protection list to your seller. That seller would turn around and give that list to his new agent, and that agent would have to make sure that if any of those people come in, that they send that back over to you as the agent. Okay, down here, listing price. You want to obviously put in the price that you folks agree on. That's very simple. Compensation to brokerage firm. This is your commission. This is what you're going to charge for commission. And we just typically will put it in there. 6% is a typical charge that we do. You can give your client a discount and change it here to 5.5% or 5%. What I typically do is I like to leave 6% in there, and then when we go to the listing presentation with it filled in, and they will see that you're charging them 6%, and if they decide to ask you to reduce it, you could always make the change later. But go in there with 6% already there, so that they know that that's this what you're going to charge, and then make them have to tell you that they want a discount, or you can always offer the discount in a listing presentation. If you are going to charge your client GET, this would also be the place to put that. So there may not be enough space here, so you would just maybe take out the written part here and put 6% of sales price, and then you would put plus GET, and that's the general excise tax. Not everybody does it. Uh, if you're going to be paying GET and you want to go ahead and collect it from the seller, you can do that here. And then again, if you wanted to, this also will help you with getting that 6%, because when you go in there to your listing presentation and you're talking to the seller about what you're going to be charged, what they're going to be charged, you can say, well, in this case, why don't I go ahead and give you a discount by just taking out the GET? And that way you're sort of giving him a discount there by just taking off the GET, and then you still collect your 6%. That's a lot better than reducing it to 5%. Okay? And then obviously this is where people would sign. And then on page 2 is just a something for you to just go through and read. It kind of talks about the obligations of brokerage and seller, what their obligations are. Talks a little bit about what we will do for them with regard to listing their property, talking about signs and things like that. Another really important information, another really important thing to point out to your seller when you're going over the contract is the FERPTA HARPTA. And this is a huge thing to talk about at the get-go, because these two things could seriously cost your seller a lot of money if you're working with an out-of-state owner, somebody who may live on the mainland. If you have a client that lives in Canada or Japan, they're going to be subject to both FERPTA and HARPTA. And those two, well, FERPTA, I believe, is 10% and HARPTA is 5% of the sales price. So when you're doing your estimated closing statement and you've got somebody who is subject to FERPTA HARPTA, you're going to want to include those percentages in the closing, the estimated closing costs. And again, you're bringing it to their attention here rather than bringing it to their attention when you're already in escrow, which is a big no-no. Don't wait till you get into escrow to talk to your client about FERPTA HARPTA. Okay, and then lastly, we're talking about the additional terms here. Anything that you would need to add to your contract would go in here. What we have in here is our elite standard language. This is something that the company has asked us to make standard. So every time you do a listing agreement, you need to use this language in this section. If you were going to create another additional term, then you might need to just do a separate sheet of paper that says addendum to the exclusive right to sell listing agreement, and then add whatever it is that you need to add to the contract. Now, a lot of people miss this and just want to point it out here is that down here it says seller acknowledges receipt of a complete copy of this listing contract and attached Exhibit A. Exhibit A is that property information form for the MLS, which I'm going to cover in another separate video. But again, this listing agreement needs to go to your client with that form, and then the seller will initial here that they've received it. That MLS sheet is very important because it has all of the features and details of the property that you will need to enter it into the MLS system. Okay, so that concludes the video tutorial on the exclusive right to sell listing contract.